r/AskReddit, NSFW, what's the most horrific act committed by someone you know personally? NSFW. My father beat the shit out of my mother and myself when I was a toddler. I have an uneven skull because of it. Until I found out, I thought it was a birth defect. I didn't find this out from my mother until I was an adult, when I had to take him to court because he had opened numerous credit cards with my social security number when I was a kid and had tanked my credit by the time I was 18. Murder, twice. 2 separate incidents. 1. Killed a guy in a fight, not intentional. Goes in for 10, serves 8. 2. Gets out. Another guy we knew gives him a hard time about how many times he sucked dick. Shot him in the face later that evening. He's not getting out. One of my childhood friends was diagnosed as schizophrenic in his early 20s, went off his meds for a bit of time and had an episode, bludgeoned his mom to death, who was my parents' friend. They found him in a fetal position crying and not understanding what happened. He committed suicide a few years later while in jail. My uncle turned out to be a pedophile, assaulting his foster children often. The only reason he was caught and charged is because cousin managed to film him in the act and turn it into the police. He got 8 years in prison only, and my cousin committed suicide a couple of years later. May he rest in peace. I lived down the road from Terry Joe Volner. He rode my bus every day, and was also a violent, horrible person. He murdered a 5-year-old because he had feelings for the kid's mom, and I guess she didn't feel the same. So he murdered one of her kids, took a picture of the child's body and sent it to the child's mom and told her he was going to kill her other kids that he was babysitting if she didn't come home right now. He got life. Then he beat his cellmate to death with his bare hands so brutally they considered the death penalty. He got life again. Edit, a word. Guy I knew from Sioux Falls, SD, was convicted of many counts of rape on a child. My kids had spent time W him, he was a family friend and they called him uncle. I had suspicions and cut off contact. Couple years later, he was arrested and convicted. He was only interested in boys. My son swears this dude didn't touch him. I hope he rots. A guy I worked with was shacked up with a manager and drugged her drink one night so she'd pass out. He molested and tortured her very young son to death. Edit, just wanted to add that yes, he is in prison. It happened in Asheville, Canton, NC about 11/12-ish years ago. Guy's name is Will. Edit 2. Reading through all the comments when I woke up, I wanted to let y'all know that I was working at PetSmart, as were the above mentioned. When the news broke the next morning, we were all granted time off if we needed it, and they also provided us with counseling if we chose. Justified, but my grandmother was molested by a neighbor at a very young age. Her father murdered him and was never caught. A cousin had his 2 young children call their mom, they were divorced and it was his weekend with them, to say goodnight. He put them to bed and shot them dead before pulling the gun on himself. My mother attempted suicide in front of me. She called me downstairs to witness her take a bottle of pills and then told me it was my fault. I was 9. Mum survived, but I've never been able to let that go. She still believes she's fine and everyone else is the problem. I have compassion for her, but I can't have her in my life. I'm a 42-year-old mother and I can't fathom doing that. Edit, I'm blown away by all of the upvotes and responses. Each and every single one of you is an inspiration and I want all of the good in the world for each of you. A guy I knew killed his father in front of his mother and younger brother trying to protect his mum from severe abuse. After he served his sentence, the family accepted him back and they've been living a normal life to this day. When we were in school, this boy from our year, we were 13 years old or so at the time, was with his 2 older brothers and kidnapped a man. The man was dating their sister and at that time, People were very protective if you dated someone's sister. They took him to a petrol station, and covered him in petrol. They then took him to a forest and burned him alive. All three brothers went to prison, but since they were minors I don't think they got that many years. When I was 21-20 seconds I bump into the guy from my year in a takeaway. And he tells me he's working at the local supermarket. Few months later I end up working in that same supermarket. And he goes to me, anyone messes with you let me know. I'm thinking not, I don't want them dead in a forest. My brother robbed a pizza guy. Twice. He called for a pizza in a park, and when the pizzaman arrived he pulled a knife on him. High on Xanax I assume he went to sleep, woke up thinking it was a dream and said, "Wow, that was a great idea, I better try it tonight." So he did the exact same thing, and the pizza guy came, and hit him with a golf club. My brother absolutely deserved it. Pizza delivery guys are like holy saints of the modern world and shouldn't be touched or messed with. When I was a kid I was in the hospital for some surgery. In the next bed over was a kid who was younger than me in a full body cast. Turns out his dad was drunk and ran over him with the car. But that's not the worst part. His dad, apparently a hopeless alcoholic, later committed suicide. But that's not the worst part. A few years ago, I decided to look for the kid on the internet and see how he was doing. Turns out, he killed his wife with a chainsaw. And then killed himself with a chainsaw. But that's not the worst part. Their 14-year-old son found them. That would fuck you up for life. Someone I was close friends with till college was raping his wife's daughters from her first marriage for years. He was also filming it and distributed the material, and was teaching other pedos internet security and how to use the dark web. A laptop involved in a sting in the UK undid all his careful trail covering. The investigation revealed over a decade of traceable data of his activities building a CP criminal network. I don't like to think about it. My mother tried to kill my father when I was a toddler by taping up the windows in our apartment. She turned on the gas at the stove, took me and left. She knew my dad would light a cigarette upon returning home. She was banking on it. Luckily my dad was able to smell the gas leaking under the door. One of my long-term employees was often late, claiming his neighbors had kept him up all night, or he was unwell with migraines etc. My wife suffers with migraines, and we had shitty neighbors too, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. One day he didn't show up, and I couldn't get hold of him. After a couple of hours, the police show up to tell me his place was raided at dawn and they've arrested him for downloading and distributing child porn. Turns out he was spending all night doing that nasty shit and then showing up for work knackered, and I accepted his apologies and excuses for years because he was good at his job. Guy I went to school with was real calm, very smart, and everyone loved him. He was a gentle person from what I remember. He had lost his mom a couple years before this. She was a nurse and they found her dead in a hospital room during her shift. Unknown causes. Our senior year of high school, dude is a championship wrestler, dominating his grades, and just doing good. He lived with his dad who was a police officer for years and years. At lunch one day he left school and came back. Everything was normal and the day was finished out. His dad did not show up for work that evening, and the police department sent someone to go knock on his door. They found the house ransacked and his dad lying in bed with a single gunshot wound to the head, deceased. Later that night they called my grandmother in for questioning because she cleaned their house once a week. Not much later than that, the guy I went to school with broke down and confessed that he had come home on lunch to ask for money, and he and his dad got in an argument. His dad laid down like normal for his shift, and he took his dad's service pistol, and shot him, and after realizing what he'd done, he'd freaked out and turned the house upside down to make it look like a robbery, then went and finished the day at school to try to make it seem like he had no clue what had happened. Shocked everyone. I only met him once as a kid, but my granddad's brother-in-law. He approached me and my mum in a cafe, I was 8, and tried starting normal conversational small talk. My mum panicked and asked him what the hell he was doing out of prison. He brushed her question off and he knelt down to talk to me, which made my mum pick me up, sling me over her shoulder, and run back to the car. I just remember being so scared by her sudden moves I quietly burst into tears in the car and we drove halfway home. Mum then stopped in a supermarket car park, got in the back, unbuckled me, and we cuddled in the back for what felt like days, most likely an hour tops, whilst we both cried. I had no clue what was happening, but Mum calmed me down and she kept saying, "You're safe. I love you," over and over. I found out years later he slit my granddad's sister, his wife's, throat and brutally beat her to death. Hence my mum's fear. My sister's friend's mom, her boyfriend, and the mom's cousin all killed my sister's friend in such a horrific way. They strangled her, sexually assaulted her, dismembered her, and burned her body in the bathroom tub, all on the girl's 10th birthday. Weeks before this happened, the mom and the little girl came to my sister's 10th birthday party and met our whole family. We had pictures of them on Facebook and my sister even almost stayed over for the night. Horrible. Our local news is currently showing live videos of the trial for the 3 that murdered her. I cannot watch it, and I do not want my sister watching it because she is still too young to know what happened to her friend. I've been trying to protect her and make sure that she doesn't find out more than what we've told, which is that she has passed away. Hearing it our news literally breaks my heart. Edit, I don't follow the news much on her case. I tried watching the live trial videos and it was far too graphic for me. I wish nothing but the best for her family that actually loved and cared for her. I hope she gets the justice she deserves. My sister, 15, soon to be 16, knows a little about her case, but I think she's also afraid to know what truly happened. She knows something bad happened from the mom, boyfriend, and cousin. She doesn't talk to us much about her. For those of you suggesting I speak with sister about it, I did and she broke down into tears. She knows and understands that what happened was horrible. She said she doesn't want to know, that a video she watched a few years ago was even too much for her to process. I've never seen her cry so hard. It just totally broke my heart seeing her mourn her friend. When I lived in a remote part of Nigeria as a kid, we had our house robbed when we were asleep one night. We had guards and they caught the thief. They put lorry tires around him and set him on fire in the garden. The smell was disgusting. They didn't bother with police in that state, they gave their own punishment. That was 30 years ago and it still disturbs me to this day. A former co-worker murdered his friend when the friend agreed to work with the police to bring down my co-worker for stealing a shipment of human growth hormone. Apparently it was a vicious murder. They burned the body, IIRC, but it's been a while. My co-worker ended up being on the run for many years, and was eventually turned in after his story ran on America's Most Wanted. His fiancée saw it, and he confessed who he was to her. She waited until he was asleep and went to a payphone to turn him in. Guy I went to high school with shot a woman in the face while she was home with her 6 kids. Gang related, of course. He knocked on the door looking for her man, my other friend's cousin. She peeked out the window and that was it. The dude originally wanted the death penalty, but due to him being coerced, kill him or I'ma kill you. He got life instead. He wasn't the brightest bulb. A friend in college, grad student while I was undergrad, back in the early 2000s, suffered from schizophrenia, but was well controlled on meds. Long story short, his student insurance stopped covering his meds and he was unable to get in to see a psyche before he ran out. Out of pocket was nearly $1,000 a month. He tried rationing meds but declined rapidly, and he and his mom spent 3 days frantically trying to find an inpatient bed in a psyche unit that could take him. I know that he was very worried that he would hurt somebody and could feel himself slipping away. On the fourth day he shot and killed his pregnant wife. He then tried to kill himself, but succeeded only in shooting off his own lower jaw. Thing is that when his head was right he was such a good guy, and he was so excited to be a dad. It was all he talked about some days. That, and he loved his wife like crazy. Always talked about how out of his league she was and how lucky he was. As far as I know he's still in jail, still has no mandible, and, now that he's back on meds, is fully cognizant of what he's done. I cannot imagine his grief and guilt. I guess instead of looking for a hospital bed, he should have just gotten himself arrested. Our U.S. mental health system, if you can even call it that, is a very, very bad joke. Edit, he didn't decline in just 3 days. Best I can tell it was more like 3 weeks. Towards the end he and his mom were trying to find him an inpatient bed because just restarting meds wasn't going to fix things once he had declined that much. What I know I learned from talking to his mother afterwards, so there are big gaps in my knowledge. He wasn't able to speak at that point and transferred directly to jail once he was well enough. Edit, a few folks have implied this is a fabricated story. That's fine and up to you. I did dig a little and found a news story from when it happened. It's a little short on details, but the gist is there. Edit. I didn't expect so much response. I'm at work now, but I'll try to reply to as many responses as I can tonight. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you have enjoyed this video and subscribe to never miss an upload.